Okay, I got a lot of questions. Where do I start? So I want to start by putting myself a little bit in your shoes. You're pitching to me, I'm an investor. You know, how many times when you're in front of investors and you sort of see their eyes kind of get stuck after the word sex? In other words, how much time do you spend pitching the logic and the sort of value of socially acceptable sex and discussion around sex versus, oh my God, you're going to make a ton of money if you go here?
Sure. So here's the interesting thing about what you've just asked, Jackie, because to be frank, the answer is most of the time I can't even get across the threshold. Okay, and in some ways this may be a good thing. I'm a great believer in be your own filter, and so I only ever get to talk to potential investors who at least have demonstrated that they have some receptivity to what I want to talk to them about. Because here's the enormously frustrating thing for me at the moment as a sex tech entrepreneur and for the many other sex tech entrepreneurs that I know. It's not only about inability to access capital. It is also about inability to access expertise. When you have a tech startup, any other entrepreneur can at least ask VCs, seasoned veterans for advice, input, feedback. When you're a sex tech entrepreneur, A, nobody takes you seriously, and B, nobody even wants to have the conversation. It's so uncomfortable. And, I look at all those announcements in, TechCrunch, Pando Daily, Mashable, etc., of startups raising huge rounds of funding. And I'm enormously jealous. I'm not jealous of the funding per se, although obviously I'm jealous of that as well. But I'm jealous of the fact that, what those pieces say is, and so such, big VC will now sit on their board, so-and-so will now open the door to their network, and we don't get that in sex tech. And so, the answer to your question really is, you're right, because I have to do two things. Before I even pitch the nature of my startup, I have to break down a whole load of preconceptions about sex. But actually, I only ever get to pitch to investors who at least have already opened their minds somewhat because they're prepared to talk to me. An awful lot won't even have the conversation. Okay, so you said you'd struggled to raise the additional $2 million for MakeLoveNotPorn. Give us an update, state of play. Where are you in terms of how much money have you raised? How much money have you raised for all the Sky Holdings? Where are you? So with MakeLoveNotPorn, I've absolutely, by the way, found a number of investors who are interested in funding us. They are all waiting for that one lead investor who will make the big vote of confidence, put in a chunk of money and go, I'm going to lead this round. And then they will, lemming-like, come in behind. And I haven't found that one lead investor as yet. But if I were able to, I'm confident that I could close the round with everybody else that I have in my back pocket currently. All the Sky is very new. As I said, I really had the idea of doing this 6 months ago. And so what I've been doing is naming the company, registering it. I am putting together the pitch deck at the moment. But I have actually had a number of initial conversations. And interestingly, I have found that there are a number of people who are very interested in the idea of funding the category. So what I surmised has actually proved to be the case, which is when you actually define a category and give people a sense of how many players they are within it. And, the sex tech ventures I mentioned, the female-founded ones, the really interesting thing is that they all struggle with the same barriers that I do. Trouble getting funded, trouble putting payments in place. Nevertheless, a number of them are revenue-generating. Some of them are already profitable at only 2 or 3 years old, and that gives you some idea of the extent of the potential if we were able to break down those barriers. And so I'm having that conversation with investors, and they are interested. And, the people I'm looking for really fall into one of two camps. There are the people who absolutely share my philosophy of doing good and making money simultaneously, see the social benefit, understand the importance to humanity. And by the way, everything I talked about, the benefit of opening up around sex, particularly empowers women and girls, and so there's understanding there. And then in the other camp, and I absolutely want to talk to these people, are the ones who totally see how much money this could make. and you don't need to care about the social benefit at all. I'm actually looking for the people who totally get the business opportunity in a very hard-headed, pragmatic way and want to invest for that reason.
Okay, so you said that funding the category is actually going to be easier than funding for your own business. But so can you just tell us, just going back to your own business, how much of that, where are you on that 2 million target?
Sure. Again, I've had people who have expressed the willingness to, I've had one investor who's expressed the willingness to commit $100,000, another one who's expressed the willingness to commit $500,000. But I need somebody to really, take the lead. And actually, when I say that, I mean take the lead not only in putting a big stake in the ground, but also be willing to take the lead in publicly saying, I believe in this, and I will therefore rally my network around it and help you close that round.
So when we talk about the sex industry, I've seen, valuations $30, $40 billion. I'm a little lost when we get to $1 trillion marketplace for sex tech. Break that down for me.
Sure. So first of all, it's important to state, and this is very frustrating for me building the investor case, there are zero reliable stats in this industry, full stop. The stats you have seen are cobbled together and they're not representative figures. And they are, quite frankly, way too conservative. And again, I go back to my point, the ComScore of sex and porn is a huge business opportunity in itself because this industry really needs those stats to be able to... where I extrapolate that figure from is from a number of dynamics. First of all, as I said, when people talk about the money made out of sex, they are not factoring in the money to be made out of socially acceptable sex. And, the enormous opportunity there, I point to the fact that, right now, E.L. James is the single highest income grossing author in the world. The author of 50 Shades of Grey has out-earned Dan Brown, Jim Crichton, to all of those blockbuster novelists, 50 Shades of movie, box office open weekend records. That is the financial power of socially acceptable, socially shareable sex. And by the way, not coincidentally driven by women. And so that is a tangible example of how exponentially bigger this market gets when you make it socially acceptable. There is also the fact that in this area, as much as in every other area of tech, women struggle particularly to get funding. And so because the world of tech media, by the way, is as male-dominated as the world of tech in general, when you do see coverage of sex tech, it defaults to the area of sex tech that is a lot more comfortable and easy to talk about, which is the hardware. Which is why all coverage you see is teledildonics, sex robots, VR porn. It's way more uncomfortable to talk about the area that I operate in, software, which is about people actually having sex with each other. The very unfortunate thing about that is that, therefore, all the awareness, promotion, support, and funding goes to the area of sex tech designed to drive us further and further apart from each other into our own little virtual worlds, versus the side that is about bringing us closer together in the real world, which is where, by the way, the female founders tend to congregate. By the way, which do you think has a more beneficial impact on the future of humanity? And so if you even out the gender inequality in funding, if you socialize and make all of this more acceptable, and if you have access to the capital and the expertise and the championing and the infrastructure other tech startups do, then the opportunity is exponentially huge.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit just about, go back to that point on how difficult it is for women to raise money. Anne Ravanova earlier downstairs said that 10% of VC funding goes to women. Bloomberg did a report last year that said when women do raise money, they raise something like $77 million for every $100 million that men make. So my question is how much of your challenge is owed to taboo versus the fact that, you're just a woman struggling like a lot of women do in this space when it comes to raising money?
It's very difficult to characterize because I represent the triple whammy of unfundability. I'm female, I'm older, and I have a sex tech venture. So it's pretty hard to separate those things out. But I think that, probably the taboo and the gender pretty much go hand in hand. And, I think, two things to that. A, obviously, I'm always looking for in the male-dominated world of, venture capital, angel investing, private equity, whatever. I'm looking for the men who get that diversity drives innovation, and that there is a colossal market through the female lens that you could make an enormous amount of money out of if you only open your minds up to it. But what I'm also constantly urging women to do is we have to be our own financial ecosystem. And the difficulty there is that, A, women have far fewer assets than men, fact of life. B, women tend not to have an investing mindset as much as men. And C, and this is particularly depressing, and I've encountered this myself. I had this conversation with other female founders who encountered it. Even when you have women with the assets who do want to invest, they often have a partner or a spouse, and they will say, I'm thinking of investing in this, and their partner will go, oh, no, you don't want to do that, and they won't. And unfortunately, that traditional gender dynamic still operates. So I have a number of friends who are building female angel investor, pipelines and ecosystems, and I encourage women to be unashamed about making as much money as we possibly can, not just for yourself, but because then you can fund other women, support other women, help other women, because we need to help ourselves in order to change the world to be the world that we would like it to be. And by the way, because we live in a world where the default setting is always male, men, you have no idea how much happier you would be living and working in that world as well.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit. I spend a lot of time in my job looking at this nexus of business and policy. And, there's been a lot of discussion around rising populism, and some would say conservatism in markets around the world, in spite of our now U.S. president, who talked about grabbing women's crotches when, he was a candidate. So my question is with, this sort of sweeping trend across markets today, is that a challenge to what you're trying to achieve in your business?
Well, ironically, the only good thing about the scenario that you're talking about is that we now live in a world where grabbing women by the pussy is presidentially endorsed. And what that means is all of this is now out in the open. We cannot go on operating around sex the way we always have. We have to talk about it, and we have to address it. And so, ironically, I actually think that for me, for my venture, and for sex tech as a whole, we are at a zeitgeist moment, and a peculiarly productive one, because along with every other form of resisting, everything I'm talking about in terms of promoting good sexual values and good sexual behavior and empowering women and girls through that is critically important right now more than ever before.
Okay. I want to talk about, you've spoken in the past about how cannabis and I think Bitcoin, obviously very different markets, but how they've, passed certain social barriers to become acceptable enough where, you're seeing money being raised. My question, what is the one threshold, or at what point do you think, what needs to happen for us to break that threshold for sexual accessibility discussion around tech funding?
Sure. No, you're absolutely right. I talk about the fact that the three huge disruption opportunities in tech today are sex, cannabis, and the blockchain. And ironically, investors and money are flooding into the other two more than the other first. And what that enables cannabis and the blockchain to do is have the money for lobbyists, regulation change, public education initiatives, foundations, all things we need in sex tech, because we need a new legal definition of adult content. All it takes is the right people. And this is a really interesting area, because in 9 years of working on Make Love Not Porn, in 2.5 years of actively working to raise the round of funding, what I've realized is that it is very difficult targeting exactly who are the right people, because any other entrepreneur can do their research and go after them. They can go, oh, so-and-so's publicly stated they want to invest in my sector, clean tech, whatever it is. So-and-so has a portfolio of investments that indicates very clearly their interests align with what I'm doing. Nobody currently is putting their hand up going, bring me sex tech. And sex is the one area where you cannot tell from the outside what anybody thinks on the inside. But I've come across people who absolutely get it. People within very big companies who would like to see this big corporate player open up to this area. People who you would never guess from the outside are enormously empathetic and sympathetic to what I'm doing. And so all of this boils down, as everything does in life, everything starts with people. All it takes is to find the right people. And by the way, I really hope that the right people are out there. I know that Donald Byrne of Corville said yesterday that there is a huge amount of venture capital chasing lots of bad ideas. I'm giving lots of very good ones. I would love to hear from the right people out there. But really, all it takes is the right people to get this, to support it, to champion it, to fund it, and to be willing to be public about doing so. And then everybody else will rush in behind.
Right. So to break the barrier, we need the right people.
Yep.
But they're not just sitting in business. Presumably, what about government? What about education? I mean, where are these people sitting, and is it a collective effort as opposed to a...
I am focusing very specifically on business because, I have many friends in the education world who fight all the same battles we do, cannot get good sex education on school curricula, And so there's a very sad fact of life, which is... It's the same point I make to women. We don't get taken seriously until we get taken seriously financially. Sex tech won't get taken seriously until we prove that we can make an absolute goddamn fucking shit ton of money out of it. And when we do that, boy oh boy, does every barrier dissolve. And so, we can't have too many of us coming at this from every possible angle in every possible area. I'm focusing my efforts very specifically on the area of business, of absolutely making sure this particular category of tech gets the funding, support, and business understanding it needs and proves itself in business terms. Because the moment we do that, all the barriers fall away in every other area around the world.
So I used to cover investment banking and M&A and somewhat familiar with how bankers think. When you said the first payment processor, the first bank, to sort of embrace this stance and make a ton of money, how close are we to getting that?
Right. So I have to be slightly circumspect in who I talk about in this context. But again, when I realized very early on the kind of barriers I was facing, I decided, I went, okay, I'm reinventing the future of sex. I want to talk to anybody who's reinventing the future of money. I want to find the people as frustrated with the old world order of financial systems as I am, for different reasons. Let's research every single startup in the area of fintech, everyone doing anything interesting in the future of money, because those are the people I want to talk to. So I literally monitor the future of money every single day, because it's fundamental to where I want to go. And so I can tell you that, within that area are people who are extremely sympathetic to what I'm doing, who cannot work with me currently but very much want to, and who I have a regular dialogue with as they try and break those barriers down. And I can't identify them because that would not help them. But I can tell you that there are, a number of very interesting areas in fintech where there is absolutely an understanding of the potential of the sector, of the fact that it is far broader than what is generally deemed by the terms no adult content. And there is a real desire to change the way that works to be able to embrace this area. I mean, it took me 4 years, but I finally found a bank in New York that welcomed our business, enabled me to open an account, as MakeLoveNotPorn, will happily bank all the sky when we have the funds. And so I can see that. Again, it's about the people within that, but when they see the financial potential, they are very interested.
Okay. I just want to talk a little bit about your background. You worked at a successful ad agency. You expanded it. How did that experience inform and give you insight into what you're doing today?
Sure. Well, I guess at the most fundamental level, MakeLoveNotPorn is an accident because it started as a side venture that I never thought would, take off in this way. But what is no accident is that my background is 30 years working in advertising. I've spent 30 years working in the business of communication. I know that everything great in life and business is born out of great communication, and sex is no different. Great sex is born out of great communication. And that's very much where everything we're about, which is, improving communication around sex, came from. But equally, I think that inherent in my background is something that, I talk to the tech world about constantly, which is that marketing, branding is not an add-on. It's not something that, you start thinking about once you've built the product. you design it into the product from ground zero. And, designed inherently into Make Love Not Porn from the very beginning was a brand that, began building itself kind of accidentally, but is now a brand that has taken off around the world and is a badge brand, because when you're a member of our community, what that says is, I'm good in bed the way it really counts, the real-world sex way. And so, yes, everything we do is informed by my background in communication.
Very interesting. And then I wanted to, it's sort of an anticipation of this discussion. I listened to a podcast about the future of virtual sex, which is, it's a new thing. How does that fit, or does that fit into your business model and your plans looking forward?
It absolutely does, because VR, I'm a huge proponent of VR in every possible area, especially because VR is the only technology that delivers what no other technology ever has done, which is empathy. VR enables you to literally put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And so I see enormous opportunity for VR in real-world sex to create empathy and to bring people closer together because of that. And we absolutely want to explore VR with Make Love Not Porn, but we need a whole different tranche of funding to be able to do that. But actually, because I'm talking about VR's potential in all areas, I want to just loop back to your previous question about my background in advertising, because what that has led me to do is to campaign for a more authentic, open, honest portrayal of and dialogue around sex in every single area of popular culture. And coming out of that, and including in advertising, and coming out of that, really an understanding of the broader business application of everything I'm talking about in a way that people don't currently realize. So for example, and I talked about this at Cannes last year in a panel about sex, the final marketing frontier. All around the world, a lot of people are having a lot of sex in cars, especially in markets where young people live at home with their parents till they get married, where premarital sex is frowned upon, in markets where whole families live together in households, so even husbands and wives can't find space to be intimate. A lot of people are having a lot of sex in a lot of cars. And yet the automotive industry is spectacularly failing to factor this into product design and marketing. Even more fundamentally, people are having sex in bed, but the mattress industry focuses all of its R&D on sleep. People are having sex on kitchen counters, and yet the kitchen industry is failing to take account of this. The point being, there is a far broader business application of the understanding of human sexuality and a far bigger opportunity to make a huge amount of money than just in directly sex-related products. I guarantee you, the first car brand that designs a car specifically to have great sex in and markets it as such will clean up all around the world. Guaranteed. And my services are available as a consultant, by the way.
Well, I was just going to ask, what do your former ad agency, colleagues have to say about this, and are they using that in their pitches?
Well, actually, the advertising industry is becoming increasingly receptive to this, because we are the masters of, human psychology, consumer insight, understanding of attitudes and behavior. And yet, I gave a talk at Cannes 3 years ago called Porn, Youth and Brands, the biggest socio-cultural influence on young people today that we don't talk about. And I asked the audience, how many of you in the audience are strategic planners? And a forest of hands shot up, and I went, great. Of those of you who are strategic planners, how many of you, when developing a strategy for a client, writing a brief for the creative department, how many of you say something like this? Our target audience is an 24-year-old young man. This is where he lives. This is the kind of thing he likes doing. This is the friends he hangs out with. This is how many hours of porn he watches a week, and this is how it impacts his relationship with his girlfriend. No hands. And I went, my point exactly. We do consumers a huge disservice when we do not normalize this universal area of human experience by acknowledging it and then studying it in as much depth as I do everything else and understanding how it impacts people's lives and then how it impacts their attitudes towards and consumption of our clients' products. Okay. And so the industry is opening up to, actually welcoming that more and more.
So in your talk just now, you said that you're incorporating or opening up the idea of investments in sex education and erotica. But there's also a broader discussion around the femtech market, which also includes fertility, healthcare, and sexual wellness. So I'm just wondering, like in an intermediate stage, while we wait for everyone to kind of come around to this idea, does it make sense to sort of package it under a broader femtech space?
Right. No, it doesn't. and here's why. So I applaud the rise of femtech because I have many friends who are femtech entrepreneurs. And as you say, that is proving to be a more immediately acceptable area for investors to fund than sex tech. Here's the issue. The single most important piece of advice that I have to give all the time to other sex tech entrepreneurs is this: take yourself out of the shadows. And what I mean by that is people unconsciously internalize, without even realizing they're doing it, society's disapproval of what they're doing in a way that negatively impacts their ability to do business and do the kind of business they want to do. So an example is a young woman came to me some years ago, had a startup, there are many of these. She wanted to redesign sex toys, sell them online, and she was saying to me, and the thing is, Cindy, people are really embarrassed to be seen buying sex toys. So we're going to package them like this, send them out like this. And I said to her, okay, hold it right there. You need to go right back to the beginning and reconcept your startup from the ground up, because you need not to say to me, people are embarrassed to be seen buying sex toys. You need to say to me, we're going to make people not embarrassed to be seen buying sex toys. Here's the issue with trying to make yourself acceptable and masquerading as femtech. When you concept and design a venture around existing societal bias and prejudice, all you do is reinforce it. I refuse to bow to existing bias and prejudice. I'm out to change that. And so I'm not going to modify, dilute, water down, and try and make my venture something different. And by the way, I have friends who absolutely have done. They've said to me, Cindy, I'm exhausted fighting all these prejudices. Yes, we've taken the word sex out, we've watered it down, now we're calling ourselves this. And I've seen many ventures lose their edge and what they had that made them unique. And so, no, I am absolutely about building sex tech, finding the people who get it as much as I and the other sex tech entrepreneurs do, and together breaking down that bias and prejudice to change the world through sex and create a better, more open, happier future for all of us in sex tech.
Okay. We're kind of running down out of time, but just two quick questions. You said all the Sky Holdings investments you're backing women.
Not exclusively, but with a primary focus.
So men can have
absolutely.
the opportunity.
Yep.
Okay, just making that clear. Okay, and then just really finale question. You want to make Dublin the sex tech hub.
I would adore to.
Okay. And what would be a close second? Where else in the world has the ability to pull this off?
Well, I spoke last year at Tech Open Air Berlin, and I do think Berlin also has some very interesting opportunities. There is a thriving, small but growing sex tech industry in Berlin. There's also a thriving, growing sex tech industry in London. I think that's a very interesting triumvirate right there. But there's a huge opportunity for the first city that really actively, openly embraces this and says, come on over here, because we will build sex tech co-working spaces. We will find out of our fintech startups the ones who want to be the sex tech payment processors, fintech platforms of the future. We will embrace all of this. The first city that does that absolutely has the opportunity to make a huge amount of money, really give the economy a massive jolt, create a whole load of jobs. And I think, I'm also biased because I've visited Dublin many times, I've spoken here many times. I know Make Love Not Porn is warmly received in Ireland, which I'm enormously pleased about. And I would particularly love to see Dublin do that. So, guys, anybody who wants to make that happen, I'm here to help advise and make that happen as well. I'd love to hear from you.
And interestingly, you don't mention any cities in North America.
I don't because actually New York has a really thriving female founder sex tech community. Polly Rodriguez, who is the founder of Unbound, which is a sex box subscription service, Lydia Bonilla of House of Plume, which makes gorgeous, sex toy containers in the homes for sex toys. They started the Women of Sex Tech in New York. And I would love to see New York become the US sex tech hub, but the interesting thing there is that New York's already a very big tech community that kind of drowns out, the sex tech founders within it. I think that somewhere smaller, like Dublin, has the opportunity to really create a very high profile in the sex tech community in a way that would give it a global standing and attract many sex tech entrepreneurs. And incidentally, I have access to extraordinary sex tech deal flow. Literally every single day, sex tech entrepreneurs write to me from all around the world because of the standing I've achieved as a pioneer and a champion, saying, I have this idea, I need help. And I can't, I don't have the ability to advise them at the moment with everything I'm doing. But I've said to them, I'm working on something that I hope will allow me to one day. And so the ability to feed all of those people into a hub which would welcome them has enormous economic viability, not least because, and this is the really depressing thing to say, and I'm trying to stay away from the subject, not least because New York is not welcoming immigrant talent in that way. And so that's another reason why the opportunity for Dublin in that respect could be huge.
Okay, in Dublin it is. A round of applause for Cindy. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.